Mizuto is a lonely nerd who only loves to read books after his first girlfriend trampled over his heart. However, years later his ex ends up becoming his stepsister. Now he must live under the same roof as her, praying he doesn't Naruto run her insides every time she says,
"What are you doing, step bro?"
It all begins in the Arito household where Mizuto acts like a sigma around his new stepsister, Yum, to beat the Sweet Home Alabama allegations. However, his plan goes down the drain when his stepmother, Uni, tells him to take Yum to a bookstore. Before they can argue, Uni leaves and a verbal spat ensues between Yum and Mizuto. That night at dinner, the parents look at Mizuto and Yum and blissfully state how happy everyone looks. Mizuto's father even says how he was dumb to think that his stupid son would launch his meat sword in Yum's guts. Uni, however, assures him that in this household only he is getting all the action. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Yum tells Mizuto that they must not do anything to upset their parents. Mizuto, on board with the plan, assures Yum that whatever happened between them will forever remain a secret between them and his dear diary. However, sensing Yum's cold attitude, Mizuto asks her why she is in a bad mood. In a chilling tone, Yum asserts that if she sounds like a Karen, then it's solely because of him. Some time later, Yum sees Mizuto chilling in peace. The Y chromosome in her urges her to quickly destroy that peace, so she tells Mizuto he better start calling her big sis. Confused, Mizuto asks her why she gets to be the older sibling. Yum sighs, silently thanking God for not making her share blood with this crayon eater. She then goes on to explain that since she was born before him, it's only fair for her to be the older sister. However, Mizuto quickly retorts that they were literally born on the same day, so they are technically the same age. Yet Yum remains determined and asserts that while they might be born on the same day, she came into the world earlier than him. When Mizuto refuses to nudge, Yum glares at him until he tells her they should settle this dispute with a game. After little thinking, Yum tells Mizuto that since they are hiding a major secret, one of them is bound to slip up. So whoever screws up first loses. Following Yum's plan, Mizuto states this game will help them pretend better, allowing them to become the ideal step-siblings. To further spice things up, Yum tells Mizuto that they should have penalty points since settling this matter in one instance wouldn't be fun. Mizuto agrees and Yum enthusiastically states the game begins. Without wasting a second, Yum starts poking around Mizuto's bookshelf, which ticks him off, and he asks her why she is inserting her Pinocchio nose in his beeswax. Smirking, Yum reveals that this is normal sibling behavior, making Mizuto realize that Yum proposed this sick game only to get under his skin. Thus worries him as his secret naughty stash is hidden inside a drawer. So seeing Yum open his treasure chest, Mizuto quickly tells her that he is sorry for ever hurting her. Upon seeing that smile, Yum begins to recall an old memory. In this nostalgic state, she ends up calling Mizuto by his last name, which prompts him to confidently state that she is out since siblings don't use last names. Blushing deeply, Yum says he is out too then, but Mizuto boldly reveals that it's perfectly normal for siblings to bury the hatchet. As Yum tweaks over losing the first round, Mizuto tells her to face the penalty, so Yum nervously says the forbidden words. Mizuto's heart instantly goes doki doki while all his blood rushes to his nether regions. Regaining himself, Mizuto scoffs and tells Yum to never mess with him again. Yet, with tears in her eyes, Yum counters that he was never this mean to her back then. Seeing this, Mizuto consoles her by patting her head, but it only frustrates Yum more. A few days later, their parents take a photograph of them at the entrance of their new academy. While they are blissfully unaware, Yum and Mizuto both think how it'll be hard to behave as strangers now since they are in the same class, sharing the same last name. At the entrance ceremony, Mizuto taunts Yum by reminding her to make friends this time, or she will be eating her lunch in the washroom. Yum assures him that this time it will be different since she has a trick up her sleeve. While Mizuto thinks she is bluffing, Yum confidently heads to the stage and performs a welcoming speech. Turns out, she is the new representative for the first year. Her speech instantly makes her popular, which becomes evident when their classmates flock around Yum's desk, much to Mizuto's annoyance. Wanting to feel lighter, Mizuto heads to the toilet to dump some. That's when he hears a group of boys talking about Yum and how they want to glaze her like a creamy donut. Mizuto scoffs internally, thinking that the lads clearly need a lobotomy if they find Yum cute. The boys further discuss how they'll use Mizuto to get closer to Yum. That evening, when Mizuto returns home, Yum asks if it bothers him that others are using him as a means to riz her. However, he dismisses the concern, advising her to ignore them. The next day, when a group of simps greets her, Yum takes matters into her own hands, quite literally, by grabbing Mizuto's arm and pressing it against her chest, requesting some privacy with him. The boys, taken aback by this sudden closeness, remind her that Mizuto is her stepbrother. Unfazed, Yum confidently declares that she likes getting stuck in washing machines. Later that evening, with their parents away, the two decide to prepare dinner together. As they work, Yum becomes hyper-aware of the moment when Mizuto's arm was pressed against her earlier. However, his complete indifference to it irks her, especially when he casually claims he has already forgotten about it. Frustrated that her presence didn't fluster him in the slightest, she devises a plan to test his resolve. Shortly after, Yum appears before Mizuto wrapped in nothing but a towel, her figure on full display. The sight immediately catches him off guard, causing him to choke on his drink. When he questions her intentions, she nonchalantly states that it's her house and she can dress however she pleases. Amused by his flushed reaction, she settles beside him and teasingly inquires if he happens to appreciate the charms of his stepsister. Mizuto, turning a deep shade of red, refuses to answer, but she catches him sneaking glances and observation that fuels her amusement. Encouraged, she considers taking things a step further, but in her excitement, she fumbles and her towel nearly slips, exposing more than she intended. As panic sets in, Mizuto suddenly steps forward, closing the distance between them. Yum briefly wonders if he's finally going to react to her provocations. However, instead of making a bold move, he calmly drapes his jacket over her shoulders, scolding her for being careless. Flustered by his unexpected chivalry, she hastily rises to thank him, only to trip over the very jacket he just gave her. In an instant, Mizuto reaches out to steady her, but the momentum sends them tumbling onto the sofa in an awkwardly intimate position. With his hand resting gently against her cheek, he leans in, their faces mere inches apart, the air between them thick with tension. Just as it seems he might actually close the gap, the unmistakable sound of their parents' approaching footsteps shatters the moment. Panicked, Yum scrambles to hide under the sofa while Mizuto sits up, internally scolding himself for almost crossing a line. The following day at school, Mizuto is greeted by a boy with a yee-yee haircut. Despite his politeness, Mizuto tells the boy to piss off since he will not let his gooner self date Yum. The boy, however, smiles, revealing himself as Kaguya and states that he is genuinely interested in becoming his friend. Thinking Kaguya is hitting on him, Mizuto tells Kaguya that he is not interested in playing with his joystick. Kaguya remains relentless and tells Mizuto that they are pals from now on whether he likes it or not. In the second hour, Yum and her classmates head to the infirmary for a physical checkup. There, a girl named Minami Ayume's plots until she scoffs and tells the girl that her eyes are up here. Minami apologizes, quickly revealing that it depresses her a lot when she sees a girl with bigger plots than her. Hearing her, Yum tells Minami that she understands, revealing how last year her talents looked like pancakes. This gives Minami some hope, and for the first time in life, she finds herself praying for the glow-up to hit her. When the fitness exam is about to begin, Yum thinks about how before enrolling in this new academy, she made the conscious effort of changing her looks and personality. However, when it comes to fitness, things might still be bleak. Minami goes and aces the test, which shocks Yum since Minami looked like your average booger eater. Finally, Yum's turn rolls out and she vows to herself to not fall behind and manages to get a decent grade. After finishing a run, Yum collapses from exhaustion, but Mizuto catches her just in time and gently passes her off to Minami. Minami raises an eyebrow, surprised Mizuto is still hanging around even though the rest of the boys have long cleared out. Later on, Yum confesses to Minami that she's utterly hopeless when it comes to athletics. Now beyond relieved, Minami finds comfort in the fact that Yum isn't flawless. They laugh over how Yum might be cute, but she's also hilariously bad at sports, which unexpectedly brings them closer and marks the start of a genuine friendship. In class, Yum tries to thank Mizuto for catching her earlier, but he brushes it off with some light teasing, which irritates her more than she'd like to admit. The next day, Yum comes down with a fever. When Minami finds out, she half-jokingly accuses Mizuto of overworking her, implying he's responsible for the sudden illness. Kagure, who is now Mizuto's Harvey Specter, jumps in to defend him and tells Minami to stop messing with his buddy. Minami fires back, accusing Kagure of only hanging out with Mizuto in hopes of getting closer to Yum. Kagure smirks and insists he's above such petty goals, saying he doesn't chase but attracts. Later, Minami visits the sick Yum at her home and starts poking around, clearly curious about the dynamic between the step-siblings. She playfully jokes about whether their sibling relationship ever crosses any lines, but Mizuto quickly shuts that down, telling her to keep her wild imagination limited to the. Once inside Yum's room, Mizuto checks on her while Minami quietly observes from the background. Still feverish, Yum starts mixing up reality and fantasy, recalling memories from when they were dating. She mumbles nonsense in her dazed state, asking for Mizuto's affection, but luckily for her dignity, Minami doesn't catch any of it. Snapping back to the present, Yum regains her senses just as Minami ropes Mizuto into helping her make something warm for Yum to eat. While they're cooking, Minami takes a more serious tone, telling Mizuto she can sense he's not just some aloof cool guy, but someone who has been through the ups and downs of love. She then teases him, asking what he'd do if he started dating again and had to introduce the new girl to his family. Mizuto, naturally, dodges the question with vague words and a neutral expression. Before leaving, Minami glances at Mizuto one last time and asks if he and Yum are really just step-siblings. Mizuto replies with a firm yes. After Minami leaves, Yum, still in bed, gets a little jealous seeing her stepbrother and Minami acting all cozy in the kitchen. Mizuto, not having it, tells her to relax and get some rest. That's when Yum softens and quietly begs him not to leave her again. She reaches for his hand and places it on her chest to comfort herself. Mizuto, caught off guard, starts to reflect on the past back when they were a couple, and life wasn't so complicated. He recalls how they broke up after they graduated from their previous academy, realizing they weren't compatible. But fate clearly had other plans, since their parents ended up marrying each other, turning them from exes into step-siblings. Back in the present, Yum, who seemed sick a moment ago, starts asking Mizuto for random things like he's her personal butler. Eventually, he catches on that she's probably faking the severity of her illness. She confesses, offering a sheepish apology, but Mizuto can't help teasing her, claiming she just wanted an excuse to be pampered by him. Suddenly, Yum gets serious and quietly asks him not to leave her again, which reminds Mizuto just how tangled and real their history still is. 6 months ago, when Yum was like you, a loser but lover girl at heart, she kept all the things Mizuto gave her in a secret box. However, looking back on that now, Yum realizes how she behaved like cottage core Gasai. Now in the present, Yum takes a deep inhale while holding on to Mizuto's underwear. Realizing she is behaving like a total freak, she quickly throws away the dirty underwear. However, this only makes her imagine a 50 Shades of Freaky scenario with Mizuto where he is about to spank her. Not wanting to return to her old lover girl era, Yum makes up her mind to return the underwear before Mizuto finds out about it. After waiting for her step-bro to sleep, Yum quietly heads to his room, only to see Mizuto clutching a plot armor like it's supposed to protect him from evil spirits. The two then hold a meeting in the lawn where Mizuto takes a stern approach and asks Yum to explain herself. Hesitantly, Yum reveals that when they were dating, she would keep his things safely in a box. Upon hearing that, Mizuto begins to blush but denies feeling a tingling in his ding-a-ling. To turn things back on Yum, Mizuto asks her to admit that she wanted him to know how she is a freak. Yum doesn't deny the allegations and only tells Mizuto to confess his crime. Mizuto then states that when he was taking a bath, he noticed her plot armor sticking out of the dryer. Before he could put it back, his father walked in, and he simply fumbled and ended up taking the garment with him. Yum accuses him of lying, stating that this is what happened to her. Mizuto gives Yum a stink eye as she asks him if he did something weird with her plot armor. When Mizuto denies doing anything, Yum becomes a little disappointed. Wanting to change the conversation, Yum states how they have been out of bounds lately. Mizuto agrees and says they must play their roles as loving siblings more diligently, but outside of the residence, they can do whatever they please, so long it's not illegal. The next day, after school, Yum catches Mizuto with a girl who is exactly like her old self. This ticks her off, and the following day, she begins inquiring about the mystery girl. Minami states that she doesn't know, but adds that she totally saw it coming since Mizuto is quite the looker and is known for having a bigger anaconda than Drake. This only upsets Yum more, who comes to the conclusion that Mizuto is playing the poor girl. Upon arriving home, Yum gets an unpleasant surprise when she finds a pair of loafers. Pissed off, she recalls how it took her 6 months of dating before Mizuto brought her to his place. After inspecting the shoes closely and taking pictures of them, Yum calls Mizuto and asks him to help her grab a couple of things from the store. Once Mizuto obliges and leaves, Yum stands outside his room, ready to warn the girl to not date a boy like Mizuto. However, when she opens the door, she finds Mizuto and realizes the person who just left was his new girl. Mizuto quickly notices Yum acting a bit off. Curious, he asks her what's going on. Wordlessly, she shows him a photo of the loafers and demands an explanation. Mizuto simply sighs and tells her to check her own room first. She rushes back, only to find absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. When she returns, Mizuto tells her he's too exhausted for this drama and asks her to leave him be. But Yum's imagination goes full telenovela. In her mind, Mizuto is suddenly the star of a secret romance, tangled up with some mystery girl and doing the naughty on the regular. Trying to distract herself, Mizuto heads to the dining room only to pause at the sight of an extra chair pulled out at the table. Suspicious and unsettled, he retreats to his room. Later, Yum starts questioning whether she's jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, Mizuto, now in full detective mode, pieces things together somehow. Someone entered their home without his knowledge. A few days earlier, Mizuto had been going about his day when a strange girl approached him with an outrageous request. She wanted him to father her children. He stared at her, completely confused, until she removed her disguise to reveal she was none other than Minami. Even more baffled, Mizuto asked why on earth she'd make such a ridiculous proposal. With a mischievous grin, Minami said she wanted Yum to become her sister-in-law. It wasn't Mizuto she was aiming for, it was Yum she was obsessed with. Hearing her talk about Yum, Mizuto realized Minami wants to thigh-five the heck out of Yum. Minami didn't stop there. She kept popping up everywhere from the library to right outside Mizuto's house like a clingy spirit that was out to get him. Desperate, Mizuto called up Kaguya and asked how to deal with her. Kaguya, calm as ever, warned him that Minami wasn't just persistent, she was a full-force romantic hurricane. He even shared a story about how her last boyfriend mysteriously disappeared after being emotionally and physically drained by her overwhelming devotion. Kaguya then offered a master plan. The only way to redirect Minami's obsession was to break the fantasy she'd built around Yum. And that's when Mizuto had a brilliant idea. He marched straight into Yum's room and casually asked her out on a date as payback for the recent underwear fiasco. Yum, caught completely off guard, stared at him in disbelief, unsure whether this was revenge, strategy, or something dangerously real. The following day, Yum gets all dolled up and waits for her stepbro. With Mizuto nowhere to be found, Yum begins to wonder just what he is cooking. A few minutes later, Mizuto arrives looking like a cater waiter. However, since Yum lacks taste, she becomes wetter than Niagara Falls seeing Mizuto dressed up. The two then arrive at an aquarium, and while waiting in line, Yum wonders if coming to an aquarium means guaranteed cream pies and filing their taxes together. The more she stares at Mizuto, the more she wants to hire him in service to her cervix. However, since Mizuto is nonchalant, Yum pretends to be rude to him. Mizuto ignores the coldness and grabs Yum by the hand, making her squeal like a little pig in excitement. What Yum does not know is that this is all part of Mizuto's plan to ward off Minami. A couple of hours before, Kagure suggested Mizuto to take Yum on a date so he can bring Minami at the aquarium and show her how Yum only has eyes for her stepbro. This will surely make Minami realize that Yum likes to do her business in family. True to the plan, Mizuto chills with Yum, knowing Minami and Kagure are both spying on them. Keeping his friend's advice on rizzing women, Mizuto tries to compliment Yum by telling her her honkers look extra bountiful today. Just as the words leave his mouth, Mizuto curses himself, but to his surprise, Yum blushes and thanks him. Internally, Mizuto wonders why Yum is acting like a love-struck girl. Seeing the scene from afar, Minami frowns while Kagure asks her if she is ready to wake up to the sound of
What are you doing, stepbro?
To further spice up things, Mizuto casually pulls Yum close to him, making her sniff his natural musk, which sends tingles down her fandango. After controlling herself, Yum pointedly asks Mizuto to stop touching her only for him to tell her that he does not want her to be so far away. Yum maintains her composure and tells Mizuto to stop treating her like a crayon eater, which makes him think that Yum hates his guts. Later on, Mizuto reaches out to Kagure for help, hoping for some guidance, but Kagure replies with a knowing laugh and tells Mizuto to enjoy his only chance of being near a woman. With no reinforcements coming, Mizuto decides to handle the situation himself. He gives Yum a call and learns that she's lost. Expecting a snarky comment or a sarcastic jab, Yum is caught off guard when Mizuto instead takes responsibility for not keeping track of her. Stunned by his uncharacteristic kindness, she blurts out that he's not supposed to say stuff like that before hanging up, thoroughly flustered. She's left in a fog of confusion, unable to make sense of her own feelings. Her thoughts drift back to the early days of their relationship, when they kept running into each other at the library. Eventually, Mizuto had worked up the nerve to ask her out, taking her to a lively festival. But things didn't go as planned. They got separated, and Yum, dealing with painful sandals and a bruised ego, ended up sitting alone and feeling miserable. When Mizuto called, she broke down in tears, blaming herself for ruining everything. But he'd just told her to stay where she was. While she sat there wallowing in self-doubt, wishing her mother had just swallowed her, Mizuto arrives. Despite being tired, he brings her a drink and reassures her that she can always rely on him for a shoulder or a schlong to cry on. Now, in the present, Mizuto once again shows up, hands her the same drink, and teases her by suggesting she take a class on reading maps. This leads to their usual back and forth, trading playful insults with a spark of nostalgia. Minami, who's been observing from a distance, realizes that the two actually have a natural rhythm between them. Later, Mizuto finds himself reflecting on their past. After the breakup, the very traits he once loved about Yum became sources of irritation. But now, without the emotional weight of romance tying them down, he's surprised to find that she's quite tolerable. After wrapping up their outing, Yum heads home first to avoid raising any parental eyebrows. Not long after she leaves, Minami pops up out of nowhere and apologizes for her home invasion and asks Mizuto not to tell Yum. He agrees on the condition that she starts acting like a regular human being. Minami, still holding tight to her dream of becoming Yum's sister-in-law, now plans to get closer through more socially acceptable means, like being invited over as a friend instead of a stealthy squatter. Meanwhile, Yum is still tangled up in her thoughts, unsure why Mizuto took her on a date, and even more puzzled about the unfamiliar shoes she spotted at the house. When Mizuto comes home, she surprises him with a punishment photoshoot using his old glasses. She snaps an entire gallery's worth of embarrassing photos, declaring them her new collection of stress relief. To top it all off, she demands a hug from behind and makes him whisper something sweet and fake just to satisfy her fantasy of a Wattpad romance. The next day, while Minami and Yum are chatting like besties, Kagure slides in and casually tells Mizuto to come to him if Minami ever crosses a line again. Mizuto eyes him suspiciously and asks if he's ever been hospitalized before. When Kagure confirms, Mizuto suddenly connects the dots, realizing he's the poor soul who once dated Minami. Looking back, Mizuto recalls how when he dated Yuma, they were barely friends and their memories were just superficial. In the present, Yum pesters Mizuto to come with her to go shopping so they can get Uni a Mother's Day present. Mizuto asks Yum why she wants to go with him. Yum reasons that it will be convenient and they could split the cost of the present. Upon hearing the last bit, Mizuto calls Yum a gold digger, which ticks off Yum. Mizuto, however, continues to tell Yum that shopping with her is as lame as having the jiggy-wiggy with someone's grandma. Yum coldly looks at him and returns to her room. Seconds later, she arrives all dressed up, which prompts Mizuto to realize that this is why men go to war. Seeing the look on his face, Yum smirks and tells Mizuto that he is coming with her as a punishment for looking at his stepsister with those eyes. A few hours later, as the two ride a very crowded subway, Yum begins to blush when Mizuto comes close to her. He apologizes, but Yum shyly tells him that she does not mind at all. Arriving at the store, Mizuto asks Yum if they should get a dishwasher for the dishwasher. This upsets Yum, who tells Mizuto to stop gooning to Sigma podcasts. In the end, they decide to get a stupid bouquet. Seeing the present, Uni begins to cry like she just heard her old ugly husband did not include her in the will. Yum smiles but notices that Mizuto has suddenly gone quiet. Later on, she finds him in front of his dead mother's portrait. Mizuto notices her presence and invites her in, causing Yum to ask about his late mother. Mizuto begins revealing how she passed away when he was very young, so he does not remember anything about her. Upon hearing that, Yum quietly stands behind him, which makes Mizuto wonder what she is doing. Yum reveals she is supporting him in his hour of grief since she is his older sister after all. Later that day, Mizuto tells Yum that they should give their parents some alone time so they can bang until their knees crack. Finding the idea likable, Yum however tells Mizuto that they don't have the budget to send their parents on a honeymoon. Having thought of that already, Mizuto tells Yum they should stay somewhere else overnight. Yum absolutely panics when Mizuto casually brings up the idea of booking a love hotel, as her brain instantly jumps to one horrifying conclusion that he is planning on making her a single mother. But instead of spiraling in silence, she flat out refuses, saying there's no way she's having her first time in a room that's basically a graveyard of questionable stains and broken dreams. The next day, Mizuto suggests a new arrangement: he'll crash at Kagure's place while Yum can stay with Minami, since both live next door in the same building. A few days later, the duo makes their way to Kagure's place, where Minami thanks Mizuto for the sleepover with Yum. Once they settle into their respective apartments, Kagure reveals something wild: he and Minami have been stuck in the same proximity drama since childhood. They grew up together, argue like siblings, and now live next door to each other like it's some sitcom setup nobody asked for. Kagure, being his usual chaos-loving self, decides to stir the pot. He casually asks Mizuto if he's ever laid eyes on Yum's melons. Mizuto tries to ignore the question, but Kagure takes things up a notch and says it loud enough for Yum to hear through the walls. Naturally, Yum explodes over text, calling Mizuto a pervert while Kagure finds this hilarious. Fed up, Mizuto turns the tables by tying Kagure up and reading aloud an old poem the guy wrote back in his cringy lover boy days. A heartfelt confession about wanting to grow up to be a cop just so he can protect and marry Minami. When Minami hears this from the next room, she's so embarrassed she looks like she wants to dissolve into the furniture. Later that evening, the four of them coincidentally end up at the same restaurant. Though Kagure and Minami keep bickering like they're sworn enemies, they still remember each other's usual orders. At some point, Mizuto walks over to the drinking fountain, trying to decide what to get, when Yum appears beside him and mixes every single drink together into one cup like a mad scientist. Not wanting to be outdone, Mizuto does the same. When they return to the table, Yum and Kagure roast them mercilessly. Later, Minami slides up next to Mizuto and asks if he could tutor her in Japanese lit. He squints at her and asks why she's suddenly up in his personal bubble. Minami grins and admits it's just to make Yum jealous. In response, Mizuto throws the responsibility back to Yum, claiming she's actually a much better tutor. Back at Kagure's place, Mizuto is deep into midterm prep, while Kagure lounges in bed. Yum messages Mizuto to tell Kagure to study, and when Mizuto relays the message, Kagure lazily asks how hard the exams even are. Mizuto replies that they're hard enough that even someone like him who usually wings it actually needs to try. That lights a fire under Kagure. He says he wants to outscore Minami now, so he decides to join Mizuto in study mode, hoping a little last-minute grind will close the gap. That night, after Kagure has dozed off, Mizuto steps out onto the balcony to unwind and ends up spotting Yum doing the exact same thing. They share a few quiet laughs and get into a nostalgic conversation about how they used to be completely smitten with each other. But reality soon kicks in. They both admit they're only spending so much time together now because their parents got married. When Yum softly asks if this weird cohabitation will ever end, Mizuto shrugs and says they're probably locked into this step-sibling dynamic forever, no escape, no refunds. After school, Minami asks Yum to head home with her, but she politely tells her she has to goon to her textbooks. Minami pouts until some of their classmates advise her to leave Yum alone, given she has the best scores. Later that evening, Yum studies, knowing she now has to maintain her top scores or else she will be a walking L. This brings her to the past where Mizuto bested her in a math test despite it being her favorite subject. Upset by this, she studied night and day and fortunately reclaimed her spot. However, her victory didn't please her because when she saw Mizuto, she realized unlike her, Mizuto didn't care much for ranks. In fact, Mizuto hit her with a main character pose so ruthless, she felt like an overworked OnlyFans girl after a 10v1 collab. However, her perspective changed when they met at the library and Mizuto commented on how it makes sense for her to be good at math given her liking for mystery novels. At that moment, she realized Mizuto was keeping a close eye on her. It was at that moment she fell in love with Mizuto. In the present, as Yum heads to the kitchen, she finds Mizuto lounging and inquires if he is done studying. When he casually reveals that he doesn't care, Yum tells him that this is why she is the brainy one in the family. Ticked off, Mizuto tells Yum that he is going to humble her real quick. The following morning, when Mizuto sees Yum yawn, he inquires if sacrificing her health is worth the grades. Yum quickly states that it is and thinks how being top of the class is the reason why she is popular. After the first midterm exam, Yum wonders how Mizuto did in his exam. The thought of losing to him finally eats her up and she decides to do a little investigation. Moments later, Yum bombards Mizuto by asking why he left the last section of the exam blank. She tells him to not lie as she knows he purposely left the questions unanswered. Mizuto casually claims he just ran out of time, but Yum isn't buying it since she saw him put his pen down with 10 minutes still on the clock. This sets off an argument between them, ending with Yum storming off to her room, frustrated. Even with the awkward air between them, their academic rivalry doesn't cool down. They push through the rest of their exams, waiting for the results. Yum feels confident she's topped the class, but when the scores are posted, she's shocked upon seeing Mizuto take first place. He appears just in time to smugly rub it in, and Yum realizes he must have aced every other subject to make up for the points he left behind in Japanese literature. After he leaves, Yum worries that now that she's no longer number one, people might treat her differently. But to her surprise, Minami and her friends rush over and greet her with the same energy as always. This causes Yum to cry happy tears. It hits her then Mizuto probably did all of this on purpose, not for himself, but to show her that her value isn't tied to her academic rank. Wanting to thank him, she runs to the library but stops short when she sees him with their classmate Higashira. And just like that, her gratitude turns into jealousy as she thinks Mizuto is trying to charm Higashira. Meanwhile, Mizuto asks Higashira how she would define the bond of friendship. Unfortunately, her answer is about as useful as Sakura in Team 7. As Mizuto gets up to leave, Higashira randomly asks him to help her put on her socks. While doing so, he thinks about how she's one of the only people he's ever truly connected with on a deeper, more genuine level. Soon after, they bump into Yum and Minami. Mizuto introduces Higashira as his new friend, but when Minami approaches to say hello, he gently tells her to give Higashira space since she gets nervous easily. Without a word, Yum turns and walks away, and Minami rushes after her. Back home, Yum sits with the unsettling feeling of jealousy. She reminds herself that Mizuto's just her stepbrother, now nothing more, nothing less, but that doesn't completely put her mind at ease. The next day, Yum starts acting overly sweet and thoughtful toward Mizuto, which throws him off. Later, he vents to Higashira about it, and she tells him he should just ask Yum directly what's going on. She explains that people often build expectations for how they want their lives to unfold, and when something throws that plan off balance, they start behaving in unexpected ways. That evening, Mizuto visits Yum's room. He corners her, noticing she's clearly flustered. After teasing her just enough to make her nervous, he tells her point blank that her recent behavior is throwing him off. He asks her to be honest with him. After a pause, Yum admits she's jealous of Higashira. She explains that even though she and Mizuto once dated, she always called him by his last name, while Higashira already uses his first name, and it stings a bit. She hesitantly asks if it's okay to feel jealous of a stepbrother, to which Mizuto responds that it definitely sounds a bit off. But then he chuckles and tells her he knew she was a little weird the moment they met, which, somehow, manages to make her feel better. The following day, Yum musters up the courage to approach Higashira and greet her. However, Minami, not giving a flying fudge, directly asks Mizuto and Higashira if they are doing it in the janitor's closet. Confused, Higashira asks what's going on, prompting Mizuto to explain that Yum had been under the impression that she had a crush on him. Higashira, visibly horrified by the thought, blurts out that she would rather shag a cactus than consider a beta male like Mizuto as her mate. Hearing that, Mizuto adds that if a girl genuinely liked him, she probably wouldn't go around making those kinds of comments in front of him, which finally clears up the confusion. In the past, Mizuto and Yum initiated their short romance in the Academy's library. Soon enough, Yum realized Mizuto makes her heart burn the same way samyang noodles burn her poop chute. Left with no other choice but to profess her undying love, Yum decided to write her feelings in a love letter and leave it in Mizuto's shoe locker. Unfortunately, in the last hour, she lost her nerve and could not confess. As time went on and her feelings could not be contained, Yum mustered up her courage and handed the letter to Mizuto. Upon reading it, Mizuto tells Yum that while he thinks she is a gerbert, he will go out with her. Now looking back, Yum labels this short romance with Mizuto as nothing more than a waste of time. After school, Higashira finds a letter stating that if she does not want her secret out, then she better come to McDonald's. Fearing the worst, Higashira quickly arrives at the restaurant and learns that it was all Yum and Minami's doing. Yume apologizes, revealing that they only meant to prank her until Minami knowingly tells Higashira that she knows her dirty little secret. Scared out of her Hello Kitty thong, Higashira begs them not to tell anyone that she pretended to be a femboy on Twitch. Shocked, Minami states that she only meant that she knows about her crush on Mizuto. However, when Higashira acts clueless and reveals that she does not know what love means and how it's supposed to feel. Hearing that, both Yume and Minami are shocked since by now Higashira should be soft launching the finger army into her cave while fantasizing about Mizuto's little Mizuto. Wanting to help a fellow gal out, Minami leans in and whispers some questionable comments about Mizuto just to see how she reacts. And voila, Higashira starts heating up like a Samsung phone from Temu, confirming that there might just be something brewing in her heart. Minami offers to help set her up with Mizuto, but Higashira hesitates, claiming she's fine with how things are. Yume watches this unfold and is reminded of when she couldn't gather the courage to hand Mizuto her love letter. It becomes clear that Higashira is lacking the guts to say what she really feels. With a bit of a push, Higashira decides it's finally time to shoot her shot and see if she can unlock the deluxe boyfriend package. The next day, the girls plan to keep things low-key while trying to find an opening. But Mizuto doesn't even glance in her direction, let alone give off any sort of interest. That's when it hits everyone he clearly doesn't see Higashira in that way. Minami, not one to give up, decides to spice things up by giving Higashira a front-row ticket to her own assets as a motivator. But even after all that, Mizuto remains completely unbothered. Feeling discouraged, Higashira starts thinking maybe having a crush on a friend is a mistake. Eventually, Yume and Minami agree that maybe she just needs a confidence boost and a chance to take the lead her way. And so they go full makeover mode. Higashira walks into the library looking like a walking fashion statement, and Mizuto tries not to turn into a statue. As she sits closer and closer, Mizuto keeps shifting away like she's got cooties. He warns her about getting too close, but Higashira just smirks and tells him to bring it on. Then, out of nowhere, Mizuto throws her in a headlock and starts messing up her hair to further annoy her. Upset by the turn of events, Higashira hands him a comb and asks him to help. And when Mizuto obliges, Higashira finds her inside stuffed with happiness. Later, the girls tell her it's time to confess, but Higashira insists she's not ready yet. Minami pushes her to take a chance before she loses it, while Yume suggests spending more time with Mizuto, since that's what he enjoys most anyway. The next day, they help her get ready and hide nearby as she meets up with Mizuto behind the school building. Once he shows up, Higashira launches into a full-on speech about how people always found her annoying, but he treated her like a real person. That's why she doesn't want to stay just friends anymore. Mizuto is clearly touched and admits they do get along well, but still turns her down. He tells her he's the kind of guy who can only focus on one person at a time, and right now, that spot is already taken by someone who probably doesn't even deserve it. He apologizes over and over. While hiding behind the wall, Yume realizes exactly who he meant. She's stunned, unable to understand why Mizuto would turn someone down for her, especially now that they're just step-siblings. The next day, after classes, Higashira is seen hanging out with Mizuto at the library. She casually tells him that she wants to see his jizz mags so she knows how to awaken the anaconda in his pants. Mizuto, however, jabs Higashira lightly, prompting her to wince in pain. He further tells her that lately she has become just like every other girl who wants him for his hot bod. Higashira ignores the remark and playfully tells Mizuto that the next time he drains his babies out, he can imagine her clothless. Fed up, Mizuto tells Higashira that if she doesn't quit, he is done being friends with her. Higashira quickly comes to her senses and apologizes by invading Mizuto's personal space with her melons. Regaining her composure, Higashira tells Mizuto that she is serious about the jizz mags. Mizuto sighs and asks her if she would be comfortable coming to a guy's place just to view his Playboy collection. Higashira innocently states that since he already rejected her, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Rattled by her casualness, Mizuto finally relents. Later on, Higashira waits for Yume and Minami. When they arrive, Minami instantly tells Higashira that her outfit screams poverty. Yume agrees and says she is glad she invited her to a girls' hangout. While Higashira looks completely gobsmacked, Minami announces that it's time for another makeover. Yume adds that since she is going to be all alone with Mizuto tomorrow, she must dress like a Victoria's Secret model. Upon hearing their plans, Higashira nervously tells the girls that she is more broke than the losers watching this recap, which leads to Yume assuring her that her and Minami are going to pay for this shopping haul. However, she must try on every outfit suggested by them. A few moments later, Higashira struggles with a dress selected by Yume and Minami. She tries to tell the girls that the fit isn't dripping. Mustering up her courage, Higashira comes out looking like a hot car wash girl, causing Yume and Minami to realize they are no better than a man. Seeing those double Ds, the girls tell Higashira that the plot god definitely made her with one hand down his pants. After recovering from the jiggle physics on those bazookas, Yume and Minami ask Higashira to try on the rest of the dresses. However, in the end, they realize that in every dress, Higashira looks like Crystal, the hoe who works the corner street. Fed up, Higashira wears her usual attire until Minami suggests she try on mimicking Yume's attire. However, the problem is she will be straight up copying Yume's fit. Confused, Higashira asks why that is a problem, and Minami reveals that it is a cardinal sin in girlhood to copy your home girl's outfit. Minami then asks Yume if she would be willing to change her fashion sense so Higashira can get laid before her eggs die out. Yume sighs, realizing that this was Minami's true strategy, wanting to see her in tight clothes. In the dressing room, Yume is prompted to think about the past when she was dating Mizuto. She recalls that when Mizuto called her out on a date, she mulled over what to wear, and after scrolling through Pinterest, she decided on a cute dress. Yet to her dismay, Mizuto did not bother to acknowledge her new dress. Thinking he's that Sigma, she decided to end the date silently until Mizuto Blanqui told her that her dress looked cute. He further added that since he doesn't want his South Pole sticking out of his pants, she should avoid wearing miniskirts outside. Hearing that, her heart instantly fluttered since Mizuto finally showed possessiveness towards her. From that day on, she only wore clothes that would make Mizuto happy. Now in the present, Yume decides it's time to say goodbye to her old-fashioned sense and steps out in skinny jeans. On the other hand, Higashira dresses up in a style similar to Yume, but finds the attire too cutesy for her liking. However, her mind changes quickly when Mizuto approves her dress. The next day, Higashira drops by Mizuto's house, much to the surprise of his parents, who playfully wonder if he's planning to take things to the next level. As Mizuto takes her to his room, Yume unexpectedly shows up, clearly not thrilled about the visit. Higashira, unfazed, grabs a book and settles into Mizuto's bed, casually mentioning that it's all fine since she's already been turned down. After a while, she starts feeling tired and asks Mizuto for a shoulder massage. As he helps her out, Higashira starts reacting in a way that makes Yume visibly annoyed. She reminds them that there are such things as boundaries, but Mizuto replies that everyone has their own version of what those are. Higashira then asks for help putting on her socks, explaining that it's tough for her to bend over because of her physical proportions. Later, Yume finds herself alone with Higashira and asks how she's able to stay friends with Mizuto even after being rejected. Higashira admits that while she would be upset if he made a new friend and drifted away, all she wants is to keep the special connection they already have. Hearing that, Yume begins to see Higashira differently, realizing her feelings are more about loyalty than competition. After walking Higashira to the bathroom, Yume confronts Mizuto about how overly friendly he's been acting with her. Mizuto casually replies that it's just how things are between them. Feeling irritated, Yume takes off her stockings and challenges him to help her put them back on, clearly trying to flip the power dynamic. Mizuto reluctantly agrees, but before anything can go further, he gets a message from Higashira asking for backup apparently. His parents are bombarding her with questions, and she needs a quick escape. Mizuto walks her home, and along the way, Higashira tells him how his parents assumed she was his ex. She clarified that she got rejected and hasn't fully moved on. She then asks if he could offer her a little emotional support now and then. After saying goodbye, Mizuto reflects on how easygoing and enjoyable the day was, just like the times he and Yum used to spend together in the library. He wonders if, had they never dated, they might have been able to keep something just as meaningful without all the complicated baggage. Mizuto remembers the time he kissed Yum in a quiet alley, and how that led to him inviting her over the next day when the house was empty. Yum, clearly flustered, mentioned that it was her first time visiting a guy's place and not so subtly said she'd be pretty miffed if he ever brought other girls into his room. Taking a seat on his bed, she noticed his room looked less like a bedroom and more like a bookstore. Nervously, she leaned in for a kiss, but Mizuto, being the pulled out a novel instead and suggested they read together. After they finished a chapter, she tried to make another move, only for Mizuto to casually offer to walk her home before her parents started launching a search party. On the way back, Yum was low-key sad since she was hoping for domain expansion between the sheets, but all she got was a wholesome bonding moment. Meanwhile, Mizuto was putting on his calm and collected act, but deep down, he was kicking himself for not having the guts to level up their relationship, even though he had totally planned to. When their third year started, they found out they'd been placed in different classes, Mizuto in Class 1, Yum in Class 3. Yum was bummed about it, grumbling that school just wasn't the same without him. Mizuto tried to reassure her, half joking that they could still meet up in the library after school hours for their usual reading sessions. One afternoon, Yum arrived at the library a bit late and excitedly told Mizuto about a girl she'd met. She said the girl was reading one of her favorite books, and she finally mustered the courage to start a conversation, something she never could have done before meeting Mizuto. For the next few days, Yum couldn't stop talking about her new friend. Eventually, she even had to cancel some of her regular hangouts with Mizuto. As she made more friends, Mizuto found himself feeling a little left behind. Then one day, while chatting at the lockers, Yum told him she couldn't make it to the library again because she was tied up with her new circle. On their way home, she continued gushing about her latest social adventures, until Mizuto tuned out mid-walk and ended up heading home by himself. After cooling off, he regretted being cold to her and decided to patch things up the next day. As it turns out, Yum was already planning to skip her plans with her friends just to check in on him. But when she arrived at the library, she found Mizuto talking to another girl and jumped to the worst conclusion possible. Once the girl left, Yum approached him with her Ice Queen face on, and Mizuto quickly apologized for snapping earlier. He admitted he'd felt like she was drifting away and didn't know how to deal with it. But Yum didn't buy it. She accused him of trying to cozy up to someone else. Mizuto explained that the girl had just asked for a book recommendation, but Yum wasn't entirely convinced. Back home, Yum knew she was probably overreacting, but the scene still stung. On the other side, Mizuto kept replaying the moment in his head, realizing that all Yum had wanted was to share her life with him so he wouldn't feel left out. The next day, they bumped into each other at a bookstore. Mizuto suggested they try to move past what happened and fix things. They both agreed, but even after making up, there was an unspoken awkwardness between them. Then, Yum saw a poster for a festival and thought about asking Mizuto to go with her. But instead of reaching out, she just sat quietly and hoped he'd magically show up and find her like he did the year before. Eventually, she realized that kind of wishful thinking wasn't going to solve anything. If she truly wanted to fix things, she needed to speak up. One whole month passed without a single message from Mizuto. Yum held onto a tiny bit of hope that he might text her on their one-year anniversary. But her phone stayed as dry as your mom's hoo-ha. While she was busy helping decorate for the culture festival, Mizuto was spending his time in the library like nothing had changed. During the bonfire, Yum hung out with her friends while Mizuto stood off to the side like a background character. She spent Christmas alone, quietly remembering the time Mizuto had offered her his jacket the year before. They didn't see each other on Valentine's Day either. Finally, Mizuto decided to end things right before graduation. He admitted to himself that while he'd once truly loved her, the distance between them had worn him down. Breaking up felt like his only way out of the emotional limbo they'd been stuck in. But then the universe threw them a plot twist. Mizuto and Yum became step-siblings after their parents got married. In the present, Yum visits Mizuto's room to borrow a book. He casually mentions that it's the same one they read back when they were dating. As they chat, Mizuto confesses that he had actually been planning to take things further that day she came over but backed off because she looked nervous. Yum gets flustered and annoyed, revealing that she was ready back then but was only jittery because it was her first time and she didn't know how to act. As the sky squirts heavily, Yum receives a text from Uni that she and the husband will not be able to make it home tonight. Later on, as Yum stays cooped up in her room, she notices a pair of antennas. A few seconds later, a loud scream echoes through the Ishido house. Scared out of her mind, she arrives at Mizuto's room, revealing that she saw something disgusting. When Mizuto states she just saw Gakucha, Yum cries out in disgust. Even though Mizuto sprays bug repellent in her room, Yum is still terrified of the cockroach and decides to crash in his bed for the night. She teases him, telling him to keep his little Mizuto under control, but Mizuto assures her he has no plans of making her his baby mama. Disappointed by his lack of will to glaze her up, Yum calls him a coward for not having the courage to make a move and get glizzy with step-sissy. Now tired out of their minds, they both turn their backs to each other to sleep. But in the middle of the night, Mizuto wakes up to find Yum turned toward him. With her face so close to his, Mizuto forgets to breathe for a second. He is then hit with nostalgia and remembers all the memories he shared with her. At that moment, he realizes that he simply can't erase the fact that they ever dated. With that, Mizuto finally acknowledges the lingering feelings he has but understands that he must stop feeling doki doki for stepsis. The next morning, their parents come home, and Yum jokingly pins the blame on Mizuto for being afraid of the cockroach. Their parents, seeing the scene, let out a chuckle and casually tell the duo how they sound just like a couple. Upon expressing relief that the siblings are getting along, they announce that they'll be heading to Auburn to visit relatives. They mention that all there is to do there is play in the river and ask them to pack swimsuits for the trip. Their mom insists they go out shopping together for new swimsuits, and Yum, ever cautious, decides to wear a disguise to avoid any unwanted attention. She hands Mizuto a cap and tells him to also hide his ugly face. Mizuto, however, states that she is acting as if they are micro-celebrities. Yum counters that she does not want anyone to catch them together, as she would rather rope Max than have her name affiliated with his. Later, Yum is in the changing room trying on swimsuits and asks Mizuto for his opinion. He's caught completely off guard when she steps out, looking like a smorgasbord of beachwear. Mizuto, too embarrassed to look directly, says it looks fine, but when Yum presses for more details, he ends up staring at her chest like a deer caught in headlights. Yum's face turns bright red, and she scurries back into the changing room. After a moment to collect herself, she decides to go with the one Mizuto seemed to like best. On the walk home, she thanks him for his company, but Mizuto casually remarks that he's just playing the happy family role for their parents. They soon arrive at the spot where they shared their first kiss. A light wind brings back all the memories and Yum finds herself reaching for a kiss, but Mizuto snaps her back to reality by flicking her forehead. Though she's disappointed, she understands they are not in Alabama. The next day, they awkwardly continue pretending in front of their parents, who start teasing them about acting like a couple. That evening, Higashira shows up to watch a movie, and Yum is annoyed because she's resting her head on Mizuto's lap. To make things worse, Higashira casually unzips her jacket and starts scratching at her chest, making Yume realize just how comfortable Higashira is with Mizuto. After the movie ends, Higashira asks Mizuto what he thought about it, and he begins going into detailed descriptions of what he liked, his words barely making sense as he starts nodding off. Higashira, without missing a beat, offers her lap as a pillow, saying her big bazookas will block him from seeing her ugly face. However, Mizuto, barely awake, ends up falling asleep on Yume's lap instead. Higashira comments on how cute Mizuto looks when he sleeps. She jokes that he wouldn't even know if she kissed him right then and there, but Yume quickly shuts that down, warning her not to waste a kiss on someone who's not interested. Higashira, completely unfazed, admits she's been holding herself back around Mizuto for some time now, but she'd want him to be her first kiss. After teasing Yume for a bit, Higashira decides it's time to leave, leaving Yume alone with Mizuto. Later, Yume's mother asks if Mizuto and Higashira are dating, and Yume gives a vague answer, not revealing too much. Her mother comments that the two of them look cute together and hints that Yume should find a boyfriend, too. As Yume heads to her room, she reflects on how, despite everything, Mizuto is still the only one she sees herself with. One day when they were dating, Yume receives an unexpected call from Mizuto in the middle of the night. The sudden ring lifts her spirits immediately, making it hard for her to control her rapid heartbeat. Upon picking up the phone, Mizuto confesses that he wanted to hear her voice. Yume, sharing the same feelings, tells Mizuto that she too wanted to hear him. However, their exchange lasts only a minute, just enough for her to hear the faint rustling of trees in the background. When she comments on it, Mizuto announces that his phone's about to die and ends the call. The abrupt goodbye leaves her feeling like a forgotten X-rated video when it's done serving its purpose. In the present, the wacky family heads to the countryside to celebrate Aben. Natsume welcomes them warmly, visibly happy to see Mizuto and Yume on such good terms. Before anyone can settle in, a lively girl races up and wraps Yume in a surprise hug. As introductions follow up, Yume learns the girl is Madoka and the boy tagging along is Chikuma, both grandchildren of Natsume's uncle. Madoka wastes no time and invites Yume to change into a swimsuit because the family's headed to the river for a barbecue. Down by the river, the family kicks back for a fun-filled afternoon. Yume senses a pair of eyes on her and catches Chikuma shooting her a glare when he thinks no one's looking. It dawns on her that Miniki's marriage to her mother is probably causing some ripples within the family, making it essential that her history with Mizuto remains firmly under wraps. Meanwhile, Madoka leans in close and compliments Yume's slim waist, comparing it to her own. When she asks if there is a boyfriend in the picture, Yume's gaze drifts toward Mizuto, an act which doesn't go unnoticed by the watchful Madoka, who jokingly states that the family tree might be due for an awkward twist. Madoka then goes on to reveal that she has known Mizuto since childhood. Despite years of trying to get closer, he always rebuffs her by saying return to the realm from whence you came. When Mizuto decides to leave instead of swimming, Madoka shrugs off the rejection and grabs Yume for a quick dip in the water. That night, as lanterns flicker and grilled snacks are passed around, Yume and Madoka help serve drinks. Madoka suggests Yume turn in early since the rest of the family plans on staying up late for games, chatter, and possibly ghost stories. Before heading to her room, Yume swings by the library to let Mizuto know the bath is available. However, he is deep into a book with no bookmark in sight. When asked, he explains that he doesn't need one since he remembers every detail. The book, he says, is his great-grandfather's autobiography, and since it isn't published anywhere, he reads it again each time he visits. The story, according to Mizuto, played a pivotal role in shaping who he is. He discovered it as a child, and it became the first book he ever read cover to cover. The autobiography recounts his great-grandfather's time in a Soviet prison after the Siberian War, 3 years of captivity captured in painfully vivid prose. The book also references a mysterious dancing girl, which piques Yume's interest. Mizuto hands her the book, encouraging her to explore the story herself. When Yum asks if anyone else has read it, Mizuto mentions it's unlikely, as the book was buried in a forgotten shelf when he first stumbled upon it. As she reads the stupid love story, a single tear falls onto the page. She moves to wipe it, but stops, realizing there is already a faded watermark in the same spot, as if someone else cried at the same moment years ago. When Mizuto returns, Yum asks about his first love. He simply says that she used to laugh a lot. The answer leads Yum to assume he is talking about Madoka, and the thought sits uneasily with her. The next morning, Madoka invites Yum to help pick a yukata for the summer festival. But Yum's distracted as her thoughts spiral around the ways she's mistreated Mizuto in the past. Madoka senses the shift and gently questions her, but Yum, unsure how to articulate her feelings, remains quiet. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, Madoka later traps Yum and Mizuto in a room together, cheerfully declaring that she expects results. The door clicks shut, causing the room to go pin-drop silent. Yum stands still, a wave of memories washing over her. Their breakup once felt like relief, a release from pressure. But now, she realizes that she never truly wanted it. Regret builds as she thinks about all the things left undone, calling him that summer, surprising him on Christmas, making him chocolate for Valentine's Day. The weight becomes too much, and she finally moves forward and hugs Mizuto, breaking into tears. Eventually, she explains how the idea that Madoka might have been his first love had troubled her deeply. Mizuto clarifies that he never had feelings for Madoka. As they leave the room, Mizuto casually notes that her nose is running. The offhand comment breaks the tension, making Yum laugh out loud for the first time in a while. He then adds that his first love used to laugh like that too. Only then does Yum understand. He is not talking about someone from the past. He has been talking about her all along. The following day, Madoka admires how charming Yum looks in her pink yukata, fussing over every detail like she is styling a model. Moments later, Mizuto steps out dressed in traditional attire, looking so unexpectedly handsome that Yum wants a mental snapshot for her personal wank bank. Misreading the situation, Madoka assumes she wants her own picture taken, and casually hands her phone to Mizuto. To Yum's astonishment, he unlocks it without hesitation. That night, as they awkwardly trail behind the rest of the group on the way to the festival, Yum quietly asks Mizuto why he keeps coming along despite clearly disliking crowds. He replies that Madoka drags him here every year under the pretense of being his only friend, and he has given up trying to resist. Soon after, Madoka returns, hand in hand with Chikuma, and enthusiastically suggests that Yum should hold Mizuto's hand too. Mizuto tries to back out, but Yum takes his hand and remarks that it's completely normal for siblings. This sparks a mild debate between them about who qualifies as the elder sibling, but the moment feels lighter than usual. Yum realizes the emotional burden she carried has eased since the previous night. As they wander through the festival, they arrive at a shooting game booth. Chikuma gives it a try, but when Madoka leans against him with a laugh, Yum quietly questions whether typical siblings actually behave so closely. After Chikuma fails to win a prize, Madoka calls on Mizuto to try next and redeem the group's honor. She also nudges Yum to stay close and act naturally. While Mizuto lines up his shot, Yum stumbles and bumps into him, causing the aim to shift and accidentally knock down a plush toy. Mizuto hands the prize to Chikuma without missing a beat. Suspicious, he turns to Yum and asks if the accident was intentional. Yum fires back by comparing it to how Higashira often behaves around him. Mizuto clarifies that Higashira's antics come with the subtlety of a one-track cartoon character, whereas Yum's actions are far more calculated. Later, a distant relative approaches and expresses relief that Mizuto has someone looking out for him now. Yum is surprised by the comment, having always assumed Mizuto's closest companion was solitude with a side of philosophical brooding. As the night winds down and the fireworks approach, they realize Mizuto has vanished. Madoka explains that he pulls this disappearing act every year. Yum pieces things together, realizing he must have also been uncomfortable during the barbecue earlier, which likely explains why his father let him leave so easily. She reflects on Mizuto's quiet way of caring, like how he gave Chikuma the toy without hesitation. She is then struck by how little she actually knew about this side of him during their relationship. Their time together had been intense but narrow, and she sees now how much she missed. Not wanting to let go of the tangled fantasy they now live in, Yum heads off to find him. Meanwhile, Mizuto wrestles with his thoughts in solitude. Ever since his mother's death, he has been confused about the sympathy he receives. That loss created a void, one he unknowingly filled with books. Stories gave him color, perspective, and a reason to keep going. When he first spoke to Yum, it was on a whim. But after their first date, he saw how clueless she could be, charmingly unaware of things most people take for granted. Her naivety made him feel something new, the odd comfort of being the one offering sympathy instead of receiving it. It made her real in a way no one else had ever been. While searching for him, Yum begins to understand her place in his story. She realizes she once held the power to change his entire narrative. When she finally finds him, she throws a few snarky remarks his way before recalling the time he called her late at night, the sound of rustling trees in the background. It hits her that he must have called from this very place 2 years ago. At that moment, she realizes that the call wasn't random, it was sincere. She asks how he knew her phone password earlier. Mizuto casually responds that he entered the date of their first kiss. This surprises Yum, who then remembers she may have used the same password for his phone back then. They exchange a volley of teasing remarks, gradually slipping into the familiar rhythm of their past. As the fireworks begin, they sit together, watching in silence. Overwhelmed, Mizuto tears up. Yum leans in and gives him 2 gentle kisses, a quiet promise to rewrite their story without repeating old mistakes. The next day, the family returns to the city. Yum resolves to embrace her role not just as Mizuto's former girlfriend or complicated ex, but as his stepsister and perhaps something more over time. Back at school, Higashira clings to Mizuto with determination, only to be intercepted by Kagure, who criticizes him for chasing someone when he already has a certain quiet girl glaring from a distance. Mizuto tries to defuse the situation, but Higashira and Kagure quickly spiral into a playful rivalry over who deserves to stay closest to him. Kagure accuses Higashira of aiming for more than just emotional intimacy, while Minami steps in and swiftly shuts him down with her no-nonsense energy. Yum, watching this chaos unfold, quietly appreciates that she has finally found a circle of friends, albeit a wildly dysfunctional one. Living around them might feel like surviving inside a sitcom, but she is ready for it. At home, Mizuto and Yum reminisce about their time as a couple. Though neither of them is entirely over the past, they choose to move forward. Instead of erasing their story, they decide to start a new chapter, one where the mistakes become lessons, and the ending is still unwritten. Do you think Mizuto and Yum will ever date in the future? And if you want a clueless baddie like Higashira, comment "I love Oppai." For more recaps, watch this video here.